A pride of lions surrounded a lonely baby elephant. Just look who came to its rescue. The grasslands of Tava were quieter than usual that morning. The sky was heavy with clouds that hadn't yet decided whether to weep or wander, and the wind moved slowly through the tall golden brush, as if cautious not to disturb what waited beneath it. Somewhere near the eastern boundary, just past the dried-out river, a baby elephant wandered alone, small, fragile, and completely out of place. He had lost his mother 2 nights earlier. Rangers suspected poachers had moved through the area under the cover of darkness. Though no bullets were found, the matriarch's absence left the calf dazed, disoriented, and dangerously exposed. No herd, no guide, no rhythm to follow. The calf, no more than 6 months old, had been seen earlier that morning trailing faint scent trails in the dirt, letting out soft, helpless trumpets into the empty air, as if hoping an answer would come. But what came was not what he hoped for. At first, it was 1 lion, then 3, then the entire pride. 12 lions emerged from the brush with the silence of shadows. They fanned out with terrifying precision, flanking both sides of the calf. As he backed against a termite mound, he let out a loud, panicked cry, his trunk waving wildly, legs unsure, too young to run and too small to fight. The lions didn't charge, not yet. They knew patience. They circled, waited. The leader crouched low, golden eyes locked on the trembling calf, calculating the exact moment to lunge. From a distance, a giraffe lifted its head. A warthog froze mid-step. The savannah held its breath. And then the earth moved, not with thunder, not with panic, but with purpose. Through the southern trail came a deep rumble, not from the sky but from beneath it. The vibrations were subtle at first, then undeniable. Trees shivered, dust lifted, and then, like a curtain pulled back from a forgotten stage, a massive figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. It was a bull elephant, old, enormous, scared, and alone. He had not been seen in these parts for over a year. Locals called him Muntu, the ghost of the plateau. He had been driven from his herd long ago, cast out in the brutal politics of male dominance, living in exile ever since. But somehow, on that day, in that moment, Muntu had heard the cry. He stepped into the clearing like a mountain rising from the sea. The lions froze. The calf stood motionless, trunk still lifted, eyes wide with something that looked almost like hope. Muntu didn't charge, not right away. He simply walked, slow, immense. Each step sent a ripple through the silence. His ears flared outward, his head lifted, and he let out a roar so deep it didn't sound like sound at all. It felt like pressure, like a warning from the earth itself. The lioness at the front took one hesitant step back. Muntu moved faster, and then the pride broke. Not all at once, not in panic, but with measured retreat, like they understood something larger had stepped into the circle. Not just strength, but memory, history, the kind of force that could not be challenged without cost. Within moments, the lions melted into the grass. The baby didn't move, but Muntu did. He approached the calf, lowered his head, and gently placed his trunk along the little one's back. The calf leaned into him instantly, like he had found the only solid thing left in the world. And Muntu stood there, still and protective, as the sky finally let go and rain began to fall across the open land. It was not coincidence. It was not instinct alone. It was something deeper. Because on that day, an outcast answered a call no one else did. And what followed changed everything. The rain fell in sheets now, soft but steady, soaking the earth as if trying to cleanse the savannah of what had nearly happened. Muntu remained still, his massive body forming a barrier between the baby and the world. The calf huddled close, his small trunk curled under Montu's chest, eyes blinking up at the giant with cautious wonder. It was more than protection. It was recognition. Somewhere in that frightened little heart, the baby knew he had been chosen, claimed, not by blood, but by something far stronger. From the ridge above, a ranger named Elijah watched through his binoculars, hardly believing what he was seeing. He had been monitoring the lion pride from a distance, noting their unusual movement across sectors when he caught the tail end of the encounter. He had expected carnage. He'd reached for his rifle at the first sign of the lions closing in, knowing full well it would be too late by the time he got there. But then the old bull had appeared. Elijah lowered the binoculars, his chest tight. Montu. He remembered the name. Every ranger in Savo did. The ghost. The loner. The legend. For years, stories had drifted through campfire smoke about the bull who walked alone, but always turned up where something was about to go wrong. He was dismissed as folklore by some, but never by those who had seen him. Elijah had doubted he even still lived. And now here he was, alive, powerful, and standing over a motherless calf like it was his own. Elijah whispered under his breath, "I don't believe it." But he did. Because some things you don't question when they happen. You just bear witness. Montu had finally moved, slowly turning his body and nudging the calf forward. The baby hesitated at first, unsure, his steps awkward on the wet ground. But Montu waited, patient, the way only an elephant can be. And soon the little one followed, step by step, beneath his towering frame. They didn't walk toward shelter. They walked straight into the open land, where the trees were sparse and the risk still lingered. Montu didn't guide the calf to hide. He guided him to walk tall. By the time they disappeared beyond the horizon, Elijah had already radioed in the sighting. Headquarters responded with disbelief, until he sent the footage from his drone. The video didn't need sound. It didn't need explanation. It simply showed a lone elephant defending the defenseless, and walking beside him until the sky cleared. The next day, the story spread beyond Savo. Wildlife forums buzzed. A few small articles surfaced. Photos of the calf nestled against Montu's leg began appearing online, shared by conservationists who framed the moment as something almost sacred. But what none of them saw, what Elijah alone had witnessed, was the moment just before Montu left the clearing. The bull had paused, turned back once, and locked eyes with the ridge. He had seen the ranger, seen the witness, and in that brief moment it had felt less like a glance and more like a message. Don't interfere. Just watch. Just remember. Over the following days, trackers tried to follow the path of the two elephants, but they were already gone. Montu didn't leave trails where others could follow. He was a phantom of his own making. But the calf, his prints were softer, smaller, full of life. Rangers found them beside watering holes, near shade trees, always in pairs, always with deeper, wider prints beside them. Some said the calf had been adopted. Others called it coincidence, but Elijah knew better. Something rare had happened that day. Not just survival, not just instinct, something ancient. An elephant who had once been cast out had returned to protect the one thing he no longer thought he was allowed to have, connection. And for the baby who had lost everything, that moment became the beginning of something no one saw coming. For days, the two elephants traveled beyond the range of radio signals and patrols. Montu avoided the main migration paths, steering the calf through dense thicket, dry riverbeds, and lesser-known salt licks, known only to the oldest bulls. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about teaching. With each passing hour, the calf grew steadier on his feet, less dependent, more curious. But even so, he never strayed far. Muntud was more than a protector now. He was home. The calf began mimicking him. When Muntud dusted himself in red clay, the baby clumsily followed. When Muntud raised his trunk to scent the wind, the calf did the same. And at night, when the savannah cooled and the stars blinked over the acacia trees, the calf pressed close to the bull's flank and slept with a peace he hadn't felt since the day his mother disappeared. But something was changing. Muntu, for the first time in years, was being watched, not by predators, but by the very herds that had once cast him out. Word of the rescue had spread beyond the rangers. Herds crossing through Tsevo began slowing their pace when they caught the scent of the old bull. Matriarchs stood longer at watering holes. Older males, still exiled but lingering at the edges, followed the trail of his massive footprints. They had heard what he had done, and in elephant society, stories are not forgotten. Then came the morning when they were spotted again, this time near the southern watering basin. Ranger Elijah was the first to arrive, having driven nearly 70 miles after a scout reported a baby and a giant with half a tusk. He climbed the ridge just as the sun broke over the treetops and caught his breath at the sight below. There they were. Muntu stood ankle-deep in the muddy bank, lifting trunkfuls of water high into the air before letting them fall in a glittering shower. The calf squealed with joy, splashing clumsily, playfully nudging the bull's leg. For a creature who had once lived in silence, Muntu now made a different kind of noise, one filled with low rumbles, deep exhales, even gentle trunk taps against the calf's back. Communication, emotion, bond. But they weren't alone. Across the basin, another herd had gathered. It wasn't Muntu's old family. Those elephants had long since migrated north. But this herd was curious, hesitant, and deeply aware of what stood before them. Elijah could see their formation, protective still, but not hostile. The matriarch stared long and hard at the bull and his adopted calf. Muntu stared back. He didn't posture, didn't assert dominance. He simply stood firm. The calf paused mid-play and turned toward the distant herd. His ears lifted. His steps slowed. Something instinctive stirred. Herd recognition was embedded deep within elephants, even in the youngest. He took a few uncertain steps toward them. Then Muntu moved. He stepped between the calf and the herd, not to block, but to wait. And slowly the herd began to walk forward. Elijah could hardly believe what he was witnessing. The matriarch approached first, her movements deliberate, her posture neutral but wary. She stopped a few feet from the calf and extended her trunk. The baby froze for a moment, then responded with a soft, high-pitched trumpet. The matriarch answered. A deep, low rumble echoed from her chest. And then something remarkable happened. The calf walked to her and pressed his head against her leg. Muntu didn't stop him. He didn't move. He just stood there watching. The herd began to gather closer. One by one, they circled around the calf, sniffing, rumbling, touching gently with their trunks. The welcome was cautious, but it was real. Elijah had seen elephants reject unfamiliar calves before, but not this time. This time, something was different. This time, they didn't just accept the baby. They looked at Muntu and didn't turn away. Muntu stood still as the herd moved closer around the calf. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. The matriarch now stood only a few feet away, her trunk still resting lightly on the calf's back. As the others closed the circle, it wasn't aggression. It wasn't rejection. It was evaluation. They weren't just judging the baby. They were judging him. He knew that feeling well. Years ago, Muntu had been part of a different herd, larger, powerful, tightly led by a matriarch who tolerated no uncertainty. He had been younger then, proud, strong, but reckless. When dominance disputes arose between males, he had challenged too soon, too fiercely. The result wasn't just exile, it was disgrace. The herd had turned their backs on him. Since then, he had walked alone, reduced to whispers in ranger notebooks and rare sightings in dust-covered journals. Now, as he watched this unfamiliar herd embrace the orphaned calf, a new sensation crept into his chest, one he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. But belonging always came at a price. The matriarch turned her gaze toward him, not cold, but unreadable. Muntu lifted his head, his ears flared slightly. For a moment, there was silence. No trumpets. No movement. Just a weight in the air that only elephants could feel, the kind that carried memory, pain, forgiveness. Then she stepped forward, not fast, not with dominance, but with purpose. She approached Muntu slowly, her trunk brushing the earth as she came, until they stood face to face. Her tusks were smaller than his, her body leaner, but her presence was undeniable. Muntu didn't challenge it. He didn't lower his gaze either. Instead, he did something no one expected. He rumbled. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a call. It was acknowledgement, a sand elephant's reserve for mourning and rebirth. The matriarch responded with her own rumble, deep and steady, before reaching her trunk forward and pressing it lightly against the scarred side of his face. Acceptance. The circle of elephants widened. The others didn't rush toward Muntu. They approached with slow, cautious steps, offering touches, soft exhales, the elephant's version of reintroductions. One older female nudged the calf toward him, and the baby ran back under Muntu's body, wrapping his trunk around the bull's front leg. The herd didn't stop him. They allowed it, and in that moment, Muntu understood what was happening. They weren't just taking the calf in. They were offering to take him too. Behind the ridge, Elijah lowered his binoculars and whispered under his breath, "Come on, old man. Don't walk away from this." But Muntu didn't move. He looked down at the calf clinging to his leg, then at the herd, now waiting in a semicircle, their eyes steady, patient. He had spent years surviving on instinct, silence, and solitude. Trust was foreign to him now. Safety felt unnatural. But here, for the first time since his exile, he was being offered something that couldn't be taken by force. A place. A second chance. Then the calf trumpeted, short, soft, but insistent. Muntu looked down, and for a long breath, no one moved. And then he stepped forward, not toward the open land, but into the herd. One pace, then another. The matriarch didn't move aside. She walked beside him, and the others followed. The calf remained at his flank. Elijah watched as they disappeared together into the tall golden brush, not as a rogue bull and a lost baby, but as something else entirely, a family. But as the dust settled behind them, Elijah's radio crackled to life with a new transmission from the Northern Patrol, a report of lions far too close to the herds. Aggressive, starving. The peace Muntu had just found might not last for long. The morning air was thick with tension long before the sun crested over the horizon. The herd had begun to move with unease. Their trunks swept low across the earth, picking up scents that didn't belong. Eyes darted toward the trees. Ears stiffened. The calves stayed closer to their mothers, walking in tight circles, as the matriarch paused to listen. Muntu stood still beside the young orphan, his great body now slightly weathered from the past week's long travels. But there was something different in him. He was no longer an outsider. He was a sentinel. Elijah's voice crackled through the ranger radio again. The lions had been tracked heading south. 3 had broken from the pride, likely hungry males known to trail migrating elephants for a distance, hoping to find a weak link. A straggler, a calf separated in the chaos. The herd was approaching a narrow pass in the landscape, flanked on both sides by rock and low brush. It was an ideal ambush point. Muntu sensed it before anyone else. The moment the matriarch gave the signal to proceed through the pass, he froze. His ears lifted. His trunk raised slightly, nostrils flaring. Then he turned sharply toward the left ridge and let out a deep rumble, one that stopped the herd in its tracks. The matriarch responded with a confused, low trumpet, but Muntu didn't explain. He moved forward, placing himself between the brush and the path, head low, shoulders squared. A rustle broke the silence. Then another, and then, with terrifying suddenness, one of the lions appeared. Not charging, not roaring, just crouching, eyes fixed on the small orphan that had been trailing at the rear. It had waited for this moment, but it hadn't counted on Muntu. The bull charged. No warning, no hesitation. His feet pounded the ground like drums, and the lion, surprised by the sheer size and speed, darted back toward the rocks. But not before Muntu reached it. The impact wasn't a full collision, but it was enough. The lion rolled into the underbrush and vanished. Seconds later, a second lion appeared from the other side of the pass. This one tried to flank the herd directly. Mothers shielded their calves, trumpeting in panic. The matriarch swung her head defensively. But it was Muntu who reached it first, charged again, this time angling downward, trumpeting so fiercely the sound echoed across the entire basin. The lion skidded to a halt, let out a half snarl, and turned to flee. The third lion never emerged. It had seen enough. The herd remained still for a long while, breathing hard, legs trembling, the calves tucked tightly against their mothers. But when the dust settled and the silence returned, they began to move again, slowly, steadily, through the pass and into the open safety of the grassland beyond. Muntu did not follow right away. He stood alone at the edge of the pass, facing the hills where the lions had vanished, breathing heavily, his body tense but unshaken. He had not just defended a calf. He had defended a place in the world that for so long had excluded him. And now, finally, he had claimed it. The matriarch circled back, leading the calf toward him. She paused beside Muntu, extended her trunk, and gently brushed the side of his jaw. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just understanding. When Muntu finally turned to rejoin the herd, the calf stayed at his side, eyes wide, steps light. The danger had passed for now, but something had shifted. Deep within the savannah, the story of the old bull who once walked alone now traveled faster than any lion could run. Rangers told it over firelight. Locals spoke of him as protector, not just of one orphaned calf, but of a code that runs deeper than survival. That strength is not just in size or power. It is in showing up when it matters. It is in choosing to stand your ground, even after the world has turned its back on you. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Muntu remained with the herd. He never rose to challenge the dominant bulls. He didn't have to. His role was clear. He was the guardian, the one who stood watch when the calves strayed too far, the one who blocked the paths no predator dared approach again. As for the young orphan, he grew quickly, stronger by the day, playful and bold, yet never far from Muntu's side. Their bond was more than instinct. It was inheritance, something unspoken, passed from one heart to another. And though no one knew where Montu would go when his time finally came, one thing was certain: he would not go alone. Because sometimes the fiercest stories of the wild are not the ones about power or fear, but about love that chooses to return when it's needed most. And in the golden silence of the savannah, under skies that had once watched him wander alone, Muntu walked with his herd home at last.